I'm sick. Good afternoon. Welcome, Liz. Welcome, David. We're just letting folks in. We'll get everybody started here in just a moment. Welcome, Kathy. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you who just joined, we're going to get started here in just a few minutes. We're going to get everybody a minute to get on and get settled. Get started here in just a few moments. Let's see, David, you look like you're connected. Another minute or so to get connected and joined. Knowing top of the lunch hour can always be the time that somebody walks in your office right before you are ready to hit enter. Right. Just one moment to get logged in. We've got a few more people coming on. Fantastic. Welcome, Kelly. Great to see you today.
Good learning experience for everyone.
We'll get started here in just a moment. We're just giving our last few stragglers a moment to get online, and then we'll get started. Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining us today. I'm very excited to bring this webinar to you and hopeful that you will walk away with a lot of practical tips and ideas on things that you can do to improve not only your recruiting process, but more importantly, how you talk about recruiting within your organization. Because this is one of the challenges. When we talk about hiring and so forth, sometimes it feels very nebulous. And I always say it feels a little bit like the marketing stuff, right? Like, how do you know if you're doing it well? And how do you get people to think about it differently than just how long did it take us to fill the job? And so today's session should really give you some tips about, first of all, how do we think indifferently about what our measurements are in recruiting, but more importantly, what are the actions that you take within the recruiting process to make sure you're getting the results that you're looking for. For those of you that I have not met live and in person, my name is Katie. I am the owner of People Solutions Center. I started this business. I can actually officially almost say 10 years. So our 10-year anniversary will be in February of this year. And I have absolutely loved building a team of folks that thrive in the HR space. We do a lot of supporting small to mid-sized companies, big enough to need HR, maybe not big enough to either have full-time HR, or they have the small but mighty HR departments of one that need support along the way. And so we have loved building this business and working with our clients across the country to help. When we think about recruiting, I'll be honest, right? These are the facial expressions we often see when somebody calls and says, please, like, just make the pain of recruiting stop. The reality is it can be really frustrating. And just about the time you think you've got a market figured out, something changes it. And the thing that worked yesterday doesn't work the same way today. And so what we're going to talk about today are what are the key things that you can do to help make this recruiting process less of a headache for you if you are the front end recruiter, for your hiring managers, the people that are making those final decisions. If you're in the owner's seat, right? Like you're sometimes the one holding all of this and you don't have the time nor the expertise necessarily to do it. So what is it you can do every day to make this a little bit easier and make sure that you're getting the results that you want? We talk about recruiting in terms of it really is that $20,000 problem because your turnover of new hires or your cost of not filling roles is significant. When you fill a role with the wrong person, by the time you've paid that person for several months, and they either leave or you decide to ask them to leave, you've spent payroll, you've spent training costs, you've spent all the money to recruit them in the first place. And then on the back end, you still have this vacancy cost because no one's sitting in that seat anymore. And particularly year after year, we have seen clients who not only struggled to like just do the day job, but they had to leave money on the table because they couldn't grow or they couldn't take on new business because you couldn't fill the roles that you had. And so it really is, whether it's about retention and getting the right people in the door to fill the spot or keeping them once you're there, it's a really big problem and it has bottom line expense implications for the organization. So what are the things that we look at constantly when we're working with our clients and on their in-house recruiting processes is to stop and say, like, what matters? And for those of you who this might be the first time joining us, know that before I owned my own business, I worked for Progressive Insurance. I was their claims and contact center director of recruiting. So at the time, I still laugh. They tell me like, oh, it was small potatoes when you were here, Katie, but we literally made close to 15,000 hires a year through my department, just through our division alone. So that didn't even include all of the IT hiring and everything else. And now they would tell you like, that's a drop in the bucket. They're doubling and sometimes tripling that size on an annual basis because of their growth. But the interesting thing is the metrics that we used, even in a Fortune 50 company, are actually the same metrics you can use if you have a small company. You just are using, right? You have less data points, but the concepts are the same. And more importantly, whenever you set metrics around any part of your business, the metric alone isn't the important piece. It's what do you change because of the results that you're seeing. And so what we're going to talk about today are what is the balanced scorecard? What are the three metrics that we think are the most crucial to really measuring your success? And more importantly, if this is an area where your metrics are struggling, what are the things you should be thinking about to do differently to improve them so that it's not just numbers for the sake of numbers? Because again, if I'm hiring 2 or 3 people a year, my sample size is pretty small, but I still likely know where my challenges are coming. And the 3 key metrics that we look at as big bucket items for recruiting are first and foremost quality. Quality has to be the most important. If speed is more important than quality, I guarantee you, you are losing money in the long run. So quality of hire has to be the most important piece. The second piece is efficiency. And notice that the categories under efficiency, none of them include time to fill. And the reason for that is I see too many organizations that think about time to fill as the primary recruiting driver, and it actually can compete directly with your need to hit the quality mark. And so when we're driven by speed, we're not as effective. What we need to be thinking about instead is how many candidates do I have to touch or get to in order for that to result in a quality hire? And the reason that that matters is, to be honest, how you measure this and what you look at actually ends up driving better quality. The things you fix to solve efficiency also solve to ensure you have high quality hiring. And then the third bucket is this concept of experience. And here is probably one of my most critical reminders for folks. We think of experience just in terms of the employee experience. Once you've been here, how did you feel? I will tell you the employee experience starts when they are a candidate. How they felt when they were a candidate directly relates to how they will feel when they are an employee, and more importantly, how likely they are to stay in the long run. And we're going to dive even deeper to that. But oftentimes, we don't treat our candidates the way we would want them to be treated if they were our employees. And that's where we start to see long-term problems with our recruiting process. So within each of these 3 buckets, there are a couple of measures that you can look at to see, like, how are we doing in quality, efficiency, and experience? Under the quality category, the obvious one is retention. We suggest looking at retention in terms of 30, 60, and 180 days, right? If you're losing people in 30 days, it is a very different solution to solve for that than it is at 180-day mark. So you need to understand, when are people leaving and why are they leaving at different points in your process. You also, though, want a 90-day competency scoring, because it's not just about did they stay, but did they turn out to be the person you wanted them to be, right? It's problematic if they stay, but they weren't the right hire in the first place. So you really want to understand, did we get the right information from the interview process to ensure that we were making the right hire in the first place? And then at the 6-month mark, we really want to look at just overall, like, how consistent are our performance reviews? And I'm not going to talk about performance reviews in terms of the traditional model of a meets expectations, it does not meet. This is about an in-depth conversation around what are the consistent strengths that we're getting from our hiring process and where might we be missing consistently on the things that we're hiring for. Under efficiency, we're looking at, first of all, what is your conversion rate through the pipeline? How many people apply to your ad or look at your ad, but never hit the apply button, right? That's a key sign of whether or not your ad is written appropriately. Then as you get further, right, how many people applied to your ad? We get this all the time. I had 300 candidates. I only wanted to call 2 of them. Well, 300 candidates doesn't do you any good if they're 300 wrong candidates. And so knowing your conversion rate from apply to, like, selected to interview helps you know whether or not your job ads are effective in attracting the right people. And that continues through the rest of your pipeline, right? Are the phone interviews you're doing the right people? Are they getting on to the next step? When you send somebody to, sit down with a hiring manager, do they get selected, right? So at every stage, do your offers get accepted? So at every stage, we're trying to figure out, are we getting the right people in front of us? And this, again, ties to quality, because we can't help ourselves. We're comparing people to the pool of people that we're looking at, right? So if I look through 300 resumes and I'm on number 298 and I have not pulled somebody out from resume review, you kind of start feeling like, well, maybe it's me. Maybe I should talk to one of these people. And you might pull out a candidate that you really shouldn't. And the next thing you know, your candidate pool is diluted with numbers of people, but not the right people. But that's who you're comparing to. And so these two go hand in hand and become really important. And then cost per hire, right? How much are you spending to get that one hire? And are you spending it the right way? Are you getting, or if you're spending a ton, but you're getting quality hires, then it's probably worth it. But if you're spending it and your conversion rates stink, then you're going to be in trouble because, right, you're going to end up hiring the wrong quality person. And then under experience, this is where it takes the willingness to be a little bit more vulnerable than we typically are. First of all, what is your candidate satisfaction? And I mean, not just the one you hired, but what about all of the people you didn't hire? Right? Do you know what that's doing to your brand? And do you know how you left people feeling? So, candidate satisfaction surveys, definitely you want to get that from the people that you've hired, but there's some easy ways to think about getting that from the folks you didn't hire, and that could be really telling for you as to where you might be seeing challenges. The other piece is offer acceptance, right? If you're getting turndowns, that's problematic. Along the lines of even just, are your job ads working? When people start applying online, do they actually finish the process? We've seen some applications that, like, somebody has a questionnaire and it's got 50 questions on it. Guess what? Candidates aren't going to finish that, and you're going to have a high dropout rate. And to be honest, the better candidate I am, the less likely I am to want to finish your questionnaire, because why should I invest time in you if you're not going to be willing to invest time in me? And then the most important part is that new hire satisfaction. And this gets to onboarding. That candidate experience has to extend to the new hire experience if we're going to make sure that we keep these great people that we hire and make them most effective. The goal being that eventually we get to the point that the only hiring we're doing is because we're growing, not because we're having to constantly replace people. So quality, efficiency, and experience is really our balanced scorecard from from a recruiting perspective. Notice nowhere in there is quality to fill or time to fill. And I get that from clients all the time. They're like, well, how fast do you fill this? Or this isn't going quickly. I'm like, it is not. Sometimes it won't. You might be in a market where that's not what you want. You don't, it feels like you want it fast, but every time you move fast, we'll tell you we are far more likely to end up having made the hire, right? We're not going to intend that we didn't want to. We're not going to intentionally go slow for the sake of going slow, but we don't want to jump simply because we're feeling the pressure to make that hire happen. So when we're focused on quality, so we're going to dive deep into, like, what are the solutions on quality? If your quality metrics are off, what do you do? The first thing that you want to do is think about, what am I even trying to accomplish here? And what you're trying to accomplish is to figure out through your recruiting process, can this person do the role? Will they like the role? And then will they align with the culture? And the culture needs to be right, not just the culture you have, but the culture that you want, which may not always be one and the same. But we have to think about, are their values going to align with what you think of as success in the long term? So how do we get to that? Particularly, how do we get to the can they do the job part of this? The first piece is about clarifying the role. And I'll be honest, this is the piece that most clients skip. We go straight to, I want to make the hire, and we imagine it in our head. And we have this person in our head that we have kind of designed, but we don't take the time to actually put it on paper. But getting it on paper and getting that level of clarity is where the magic from a recruiting perspective happens. Stacy and I were just having, one of my team members and I, she's my operations manager, and she handles all of our hiring. We were just talking earlier today about a role that we want to add to the team. And she and I, for a couple of weeks now, have been bouncing back and forth on, well, we think this is what we want them to do, and we think it's this. And then we come back a couple days later and we talk about it again. And it's funny how it, like, just little shifts, right? And finally, after yesterday, we were probably on our third or fourth conversation, kind of brainstorming this. She's like, all right, I'm going to put a draft job description on paper. We're going to nail it down. But getting that level of clarity will make all the difference to us in our who we are looking for at resume review, who we write the job ad for, who gets past her in the interview process to interview with me, right? And are we actually looking for the same things in the end? But if we skip over clarify the role and jump right to, well, let's get the posting out there today, we miss the opportunity to really set this up for success from the beginning. So part of this is about the job description and getting clear on percentages of time that the person will spend. And the other part of this is on understanding and really thinking through, if this is how they're going to spend their time, what is it they have to be really good at in order to be successful? One of the large conversations she and I had was actually around, and what do they need to love doing? Because the role that we're going to put them in is a little bit of a hybrid. So they have to love doing several things and not feel bad if they're not going to get to do other parts of the job. And so that time spent up front is huge. And then we got to do the hard part. We have to master interviewing. The reality is so many of our clients have not had the opportunity to go through formal interview training. So you're just asking questions you've always asked. And here is where then you're going from the gut and you're not making clear decisions that align with all of that clarification work that you did on the front end. And so I'm going to take you through some ideas and best practices for interviewing to eliminate this dilemma of, I don't know what I'm asking. I have no idea whether or not they told me the right answer. And I'm not sure, but they seemed really nice. So let's roll the dice and see what happens, right? Which is how most of us feel when we're interviewing. Sometimes even when we have clients, we'll have done all the role clarification with them on the front end. We've done all the screening. And then we get an email back that says, sorry, we're going to pass. Well, that doesn't help us, right? We've got to have feedback to hear, all right, tell us why. What was missing? What do we need to adjust? But if I don't know what I'm looking for, then nobody can tell me whether or not, why I turned the person down in the first place. So getting really clear and then making sure that you're asking the right questions in the interview process to assess those competencies is really key. This brings us to competency-based hiring. Many of you are spending a ton of time in the interview on the resume and the why did they leave this job and why did they leave that job, which is important sometimes, but you don't really know what is it that's going to make someone great at this role. And that's the exercise that is most important. So when you're hiring for roles, you need to define what are the competencies that truly make someone successful. And in order to do that, you have to think about all the people who have ever been a top performer in this role. What do they have in common? When you think about the folks that have struggled, what weren't they good at? And then we also have to think about some competencies are more trainable than others. I'm working with a client right now. We're actually building career ladders for them because they have a very clear level 1, level 2, level 3 type of environment. And it's an architect and interior design company. And so we actually have spent time thinking about, first of all, what will they do at level 1 that's different than the type of work they'll do at level 2? And to get hired at level 1, what do they have to have as just strong foundational competencies that set them up for success? Because in reality, while they have these other levels, if somebody said, I want to be a level 1 forever, they probably wouldn't in the long run be successful. And so we have to think about that role, but we also have to think about where do they need to be in 2 or 3 years to be able to be a level 2? And are they going to be able to be successful? So we took a list of 25 competencies and I had the group tell me, narrow down their top 8. And now we start to have alignment conversations around what is it we're really looking for in order to be successful in the role. That exercise is game changing from an interviewing perspective, because to be honest, it's the basis of behavioral based interviewing. And behavioral based interviewing is this whole concept that my past behavior predicts my future behavior, right? So the reality is I hate making a budget. I hate making a budget in any part of my life, right? Doesn't mean I don't do it, but I hate it. And my husband knows that the minute he says, we should sit down and discuss the budget, my reaction is going to be the exact same that it was the last 50 times he said it. I will do it, but we also have to make sure there's a really fun evening planned after it because it's not going to go well. My past behavior is very predictive of what I will do going forward. That is true for most human beings. It doesn't mean we're not coachable. It doesn't mean we don't learn, but left to our own devices, some things are just a bit more innate and we're going to default to them as our normal. So if I understand the competencies that I need for somebody to be good at, then I ask them questions about, tell me when you've done this before. Now I'm getting insight as to how are they likely to do it going forward. And that is the premise behind behavioral-based interviewing. When I teach this, I talk about it in terms of behavioral-based interviewing talks in terms of stars, right? In the interview process, you are trying to get stories from the candidate. You literally are like holding a basket and just walking beside the candidate and picking up their stories to assess what have they done in the past and how will that impact what you want them to do in the future in this role. Do they have the experiences at all? If they do, did they approach those experiences the way you would want them approached in your organization? So a star means you want that story to start with what's the situation they dealt with, what's the action they took, and then what was the outcome. But the most important part that you're listening for is this action piece, right? What steps did they take to solve the problem, deal with the customer, all of those things. So that's the bulk of your interview, is getting a candidate to tell you about these actions. Now, I will tell you, I have clients all the time that go, oh, Katie, those stupid tell me about a time questions. I never get anything. Nobody ever tells me that. Well, I'm about to shift the paradigm for you. You need to stop thinking about your interviews as a way to assess the candidate's ability to be a good interview. Instead, it is incumbent on you as the interviewer to be a great interviewer, because they're not going to come to work for you to be a full-time candidate. They're going to come to work for you to do the job you need done. And so you need to be assessing, can they do that job, not can they have a great interview? And that mindset shift puts you in a position to control the interview, get the information you need to understand, can they do the role? Will they enjoy the role? And will they align with your culture and values? But doing that through behavioral-based interviewing means you have to ask follow-up questions, you have to understand what you're looking for, and you have to be really curious to hear what the candidate is saying and not walk away when they go, oh, I do that all the time. It always works out. That doesn't tell you whether or not they did the job the way you wanted it done or not. So great interviewing matters on competencies. The will they enjoy the job comes down to motivational fit. And this is when somebody calls me and says, Katie, they could do it. They've got all the experience. They just didn't fit, right? And it's so hard to put words to it. But I will tell you that when you are able to put words to what do you mean when you're like, oh, it just doesn't feel right. When you're able to do that, it will not only, first of all, put you in a much more secure place in terms of the liability of your decision making, but more importantly, it makes you better at every hiring decision you make. And one of the best ways to think about what is that is to think about the job that you're hiring for. What is it they will do a lot of, and what won't they ever get the chance to do? Because if I'm a candidate and I like doing something and I get to do it all the time, I'm likely to stay in that job for a really long time. But if I don't like to do something and I have to do it all the time, I'm not going to hold out for very long, right? You might get me for a few months, but I'm not going to stay longer than that. And on the flip side, if I never get to do something that I don't like, I'm happy as a clam. But if I love to do something and I never get the chance to do it, I'm also likely to leave. And so we have to understand in every role, what are the things that they're going to get to do a lot? What are they never going to get to do? And then we have to use ways through behavioral interviewing in our conversations with candidates to talk about those things and to get examples from them of what are the things that they've liked and disliked in previous jobs and how is that going to relate to what they're going to get here. When you can articulate this about a candidate, one, you get past that gut feel, which we're going to talk about in a bit, but more importantly, you start to really learn about how to describe the job to the candidate, how to really explain to people what to expect and what to show them through your interview process to make sure that you actually hire the right candidate, because there are great candidates who are high quality candidates. They're just not the right candidate for your job, but it doesn't mean they're not great people. The questions we want to get away from in behavioral based interviewing, and all of these are real questions that I have heard. I promise I've heard all of them. The first one is my favorite. I was sure when I was at corporate America that this was a myth, but I've seen it on interview guides of clients since then. If you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? I'm very unclear about what that would possibly tell me about a candidate, but I have heard it as an actual question. Also, we want to avoid things like accuracy is important. Are you detail oriented? Because I don't know a candidate in the world who in an interview setting is going to go, no, I'm really bad at that, right? Like that's just not the answer you're going to get. So you'll hear what you want to hear, but not what you need to hear. Tell me about your strengths. I'm a people person. I might be, but your version of people person and my version of people person may not be exactly the same. So it doesn't really help me. And then tell me why we should select you for this role. That's a question that if I've done a ton of interviewing, I'm prepped for that, but it tells me nothing about like, what are they really going to be good at when they get on the job? And so these are the things we want to get rid of. Take these out of your repertoire. Instead, what we want you to ask is, tell me about a time you went above and beyond for a client, right? This tells me two things. First of all, what do you think is above and beyond? Because your version of above and beyond may not quite be as beyond as mine is. And it also then you ask follow-up questions like, well, tell me what you did. Was that in line with your normal policy? Did you have to get permission to go above and beyond? What did you like about how, like, what did it feel like to be in an environment where you were really empowered to go above and beyond? What did it feel like to be in an environment where you didn't have that flexibility, right? You want to be curious. It's like you're sitting down at a dinner party with this person and you're so entrenched in their story that you want to know every piece, but you don't want to know about the situation. You want to know, how did they handle it and how did they feel about that? Tell me what you liked about your last job. Again, people will tell you, I'm always amazed. People will like call for a call center job and tell me what you liked. And they're like, oh, well, I hated being on the phone. Like, I don't know how you didn't see that one coming, but it happens all the time. But these stories and these stars are how you will start to differentiate your candidate pool. Now we're going to do a little bit of an exercise, because even in a webinar, we should get interactive. So pull up your chat boxes and get started. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds and I want you to look at this picture. And then when you're looking at this picture, I want you to find everything pink. So count them up, make a list. I don't care, but you are looking for as many pink things as you can find in this picture. I'm going to give you about 8 seconds to find all of the pink things. All right, I'm going to ask a couple of questions and I want you to just drop the answers in chat. All right. So first question, what was on the floor at the foot of the bed? Number 2, what 2 items are on the dresser at the foot of the bed? Number 3, what is on the floor in front of the window? And number 4, what 2 items were on the bed? I'm going to see how many folks got our answers correct. Got a panda, we've got a laptop to the what's on the bed, we have a picture frame and a lamp, right? So let me ask this. Go ahead and drop it in the window in the chat. How many of you got all 4 right? How many, tell me if you got some but not all. And then also put in there, if you thought you were looking at a different picture, give me that information as well. Right. Very few right, Liz. Yep. Kelly, you got about half. Yeah, some, not all. Here's the interesting thing, right? This is way harder than it should be. If we look back at the picture, right, on the floor at the foot of the bed, it's Panda Bear right there, right? On the dresser, picture and a lamp. In front of the window, there's a vase with flowers. And on the bed, there's the laptop, there's the phone. Usually people will say pillow or blanket because they were pink, right? I gave you a filter and that's all you saw, Recruiting is fraught with this concept. Everything from what do you see on a resume and what are you looking for is, and what do you ask in an interview and how does somebody show up? We are absolutely destined to be bad at picking the right people because our filters get in our way. And there's all sorts of science around this idea that as human beings, we make 11 judgments about people in the first 7 seconds that we see them. And the same thing goes for the resume. So if I've got 11 judgments in the first 7 seconds I see your resume, and then the person that does the phone interview makes 11 judgments in the first 7 seconds of that interview, and the third person that interviews them is doing the same thing, how are we ever making an accurate decision, particularly because those judgments may or may not prove out to be true? And sometimes those judgments are positive, which means now we think you're a great candidate. Think about the last time your best hire sent you a referral. You went into that interview thinking, we're going to have a hire. Guessing you probably made the hire too, because, right, when you go in with that thinking, you stop asking all of the right questions. And so thinking about what are the filters in your process and are they helping you or hurting you from a quality perspective is really key. So those are some easy solutions on quality. I'm going to move into efficiency, but if anybody has any questions on quality, feel free to throw those into the chat. I will definitely pick those up as we're going through. So efficiency, again, is more about, are you using your time the right way? And if we're more efficient, we will also get better at time to fill, but our measures are actually about efficiency, not speed. One of the best places to make a difference in the efficiency of your process, which also helps the quality of your outcomes, is to change up your job ads. Job ads are solely driven right now by this creation of Indeed, right? And back in the day, Monster and Career Builders, if you're old enough to remember those, right? It was a job posting and it went up there and it came up in people's searches. And if you paid more money, it came up more frequently. And it was supposed to be this like cool, funky, like if you did it well, it was a cool, fun, funky way to draw people in. Indeed is not that. Indeed is a search engine, and search engines are run by algorithms. And algorithms don't like cool and funky and weird. Algorithms like simplicity. They like repeatability, right? They want to make matches. And so you have to stop thinking like a creative marketing person and start thinking like a search engine. Most importantly, you have to put your head into the seat of what would my candidate be thinking? Not what do I want them to think, but what are they thinking? So you have to put yourself in that seat and then think about what are the keywords they would search for, right? If I am looking for an account manager and I'm in landscaping, am I going to just type in account manager? Or am I going to try and just start broader and go, you know what? I think I'm going to look and see what's out there in landscaping in the city and see what happens, right? So you got to think about what words are they leading with and lead with those same words. You also have to repeat yourself. They say a minimum of 5 times using the job title within your job ad will increase your algorithm outcomes for Indeed. Some of the ways you do this, go out and look at your competition. Now, be a little careful here because, right, a lot of employers are really bad at writing great job ads. So if you're just like, well, my competitor is doing it, well, that's okay, but your competitor might be equally as bad as you are. But you do at least want to look to see what are other words that candidates might be seeing, what's the salary rate, to get a sense as to what you need to be doing locally. Also use existing resumes. Look at the last 10 people that you hired that you liked. What job titles did they list? Where did they work, right? What might they have? What else is in their resume that would make it a good match? And then most importantly, you can use some AI, but be careful with AI because AI can steer you a little wrong. AI likes to make job ads too wordy. And it doesn't necessarily know the Indeed algorithm well enough to write the ad the right way. So oftentimes we will have a client, we write the job ad for them, and then they come back and you can tell they've put it through AI and they're like, oh, but I think this one's better. I'm like, well, it does read very nicely as a, as a creative writing tool, but it's not going to work for Indeed. So we talked about job titles and job titles mattering. This is probably one of the most important things you can learn from job ads, which helps your efficiency. The first two words that you list in your job title are the most important. And they don't have to be, and likely often aren't, necessarily the same two words you list when you talk to somebody every day who's in this job, right? So you may be my account manager, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those are the two words that candidates are going to search for. And so, for an example from the landscape space, I will get different results, better or worse, if I use the word landscape production manager versus landscaping manager dash production versus just landscaping manager, because those first two words are key. Most folks, the word production, even though that is a very common word in landscaping specifically, does not get you the outcomes that you're looking for. So you might need to play with it. You might use it from time to time to switch things up, but you probably don't want to start with it. Same thing in some situations, landscaping gets better outcomes than landscape. Odd. I can't even get into people's head to understand the difference why, but you definitely would want to look at the differences between those words. Oftentimes, for example, we'll have people who are like, I need to hire outside of landscaping, right? I need to hire a member services coordinator. Well, I guarantee you no candidate ever sat down and went, I'm going to type in member services and see what I get, right? So you've got to be really careful when you're creating your job titles externally that you don't go with crazy, fun, funky job titles. What you call people internally does not matter, but use something in a job ad that people will actually search. You can always explain in the interview what the role is called internally, and candidates are used to that, so it's not a big deal. The other piece that you want to think about is how long is the ad. Keep it short. They Indeed will share with you that most candidates ideally, want to be able to read the ad on their phone without scrolling incessantly, and they would prefer to be able to read the job ad sitting at a stoplight. So 300 to 700 words max in Indeed from beginning to end is going to help improve your job ad results dramatically. And the closer to the 300 side of that mix you can get, the better. Indeed will put these at the top of their algorithms, so it's really important that you get this right. You want to use bullet points whenever you can. Long paragraphs are not going to get read. They're not going to work. So you want bullet points, maybe 2-3 sentences if you're using a paragraph at most. Also, the order in which you put information in the job ad matters. So you want to lead with a blurb about the company that is interesting enough that people go, huh, I want to learn something more about this. But it should not be the whole history of the company. Again, short, quick blurb that gives you something about the company that intrigues the reader to read more. I've seen some of these and they're like half the page. That's not where you want to go with this. Then you want to talk about comp and benefits. We're going to talk about this, how much detail to put in here in a minute, but you want to make sure it's early in the ad so that you catch people's attention and they know whether or not they should continue. Then you want the requirements, and then you want, here's what the job will actually be. This is, especially those last two, it's opposite of how we naturally tend to write job ads, but flipping it will get you better results on Indeed. Keep in mind, over 68% of people are searching on their phone, and these things are not very big, right? So we're trying to read like this. We're not going to stick with it for very long. So back to the efficiency piece, if you look at your Indeed results and you're getting a lot of views, but you're not getting a lot of applies, it's likely your job ad. And that's why that efficiency measure matters so much. Show me the money is a big piece with Indeed. You absolutely want to put in as much information as possible around compensation and benefits. it is absolutely critical that you put salary in Indeed. If you don't list the salary or the hourly rate, Indeed will add it for you, and you will likely not like the number. Sometimes they will go too high, and then you've got a candidate pool full of people who don't want you to pay them a whole lot more. Sometimes they'll go way too low, and then you won't get any candidates at all. And so you need to put your number in there, and your number has to be not just based on what you'd like to do, but like you have to think about what is your competition doing and what is the market rate in your area. And then you also want to put in any information you have around your benefits. Do you have vacation time? How much is it? Do you have health insurance? Do you have medical? Do you have dental? Do you have 401k? All of that needs to be in the ad. The more you can add in here, the better. And I will tell you, more and more, we continue to see roles posted that do not have some sort of health insurance option are taking forever to fill. There's a difference even if you have a health insurance plan versus a health stipend. Stipends are going to go slower, but if you have nothing, you and the turtle are racing the way down the street at that level. So you need to find options to provide people access to healthcare. Regardless of how small you are, there's plenty of ways to get creative, but an ad that does not mention that will get far fewer candidates applying, and the quality of your candidates will fall dramatically. So those are some tips for the efficiency side of the house. We're going to wrap up with some ideas on experience, because again, this is the part that I feel like we kind of get out of the habit of paying attention to. The minute the market opens up a little bit, we're like, well, they should want us. Well, you know what? They should, but we better treat them well because they do have options, right? We are very much in a labor market where people have other options on the table. We have 3 offers out right now this week for clients, all of which said, I think I'm a yes, but let me think about it until Friday. Like, we don't want to lose them, right? So you've got to make sure that they have every reason to say yes. One of the key factors that gets forgotten that makes the biggest difference in candidate conversion is their experience, right? How did it feel to be a candidate? And there's a couple of reasons. First of all, right, every person you're talking to is probably also talking to some other employer. So that experience matters because somebody else is trying to get them to come to work for them. The second reason is your ability to retain a high quality person starts during the candidate experience. And here's why. If I have a great experience as a candidate, then when you make me the offer, I'm like, this is fabulous. I am so excited to be there. And I walk in day one and I'm like, this is fantastic. I can't believe I got this job. And every little thing that goes wrong in the week of onboarding, which let's be honest, it will, every little thing that goes along, you're like, oh, but that's okay because I'm really excited to be here. On the flip side, if I had an candidate experience where I wasn't really sure you actually cared about me, or maybe you took a really long time to call me back, or maybe you just didn't treat me very well or wow me along the way, now I come into the first day going, we'll give it a try. Let's see how it goes. Right? And now every little thing that goes wrong in that first week is depositing into that piggy bank of like, I'm not sure this is right, until that moment that we suddenly go, yeah, there were signs from the beginning. So, right, think about this. It is a dating process and you are dating them as much as they are dating you. And you need to make sure that they walk away feeling like that's a place that I want to be. Because if they treat their candidates that way, imagine how wonderfully they treat their team members. The flip side to that is if they treat their candidates that way, how bad are they to their team members? And you don't want to be in that bucket. The other reason that candidate experience matters is you're paying for these people. You're paying for every applicant that walks in your door. Cost per applicant is big. And if you are spending a ton of money to get one quality hire, you're wasting money. So instead, if we have a candidate experience that is efficient, is like, we don't have to wow them. You don't have to throw them a party at their interview, but you have to act like we care that you're here. And that's a big piece of it. And if all of that doesn't convince you that candidate experience matters, for most of our clients, I can tell you, your candidates are your customers, or they at minimum know your customers. And the brand that you leave them with, the feeling you leave them with, will last and go into your outcomes from a revenue perspective. So treat people well, know that interviewing is hard and going through a job search is hard. Have a little bit of empathy. And if you come at it with a, well, if they don't want us, then it's not worth it, you will find that you miss out on the best possible candidate. So again, impacts your quality overall. The next piece of experience, though, is the onboarding side of the house. So onboarding, boy, has it changed, right? Like it used to be, here's your paperwork, hop in the truck and go. Like, here's your paperwork, here's your desk, good luck. If that's where you still are, you are going to have challenges in all of your hiring metrics, right? We literally used to take the approach of, let's wait and see if they stick around for 90 days, and then I'll train them if I think they're worth it. Well, guess what? Candidates and new hires feel that, and I'm not going to put my heart and soul into winning you over if you're not willing to put yourself out there a little bit. So today, you have to approach onboarding with a completely different mindset. You need a formal 6-month onboarding process. Now, that doesn't mean they're training and only doing training for 6 full months, but you need a well-defined orientation. You need something that is scalable and repeatable because guess what? Life will happen. It needs to be written down so that everybody can go back. Life is going to happen. You're not going to meet with them on Wednesday the way you thought you would, right? But you've got a plan to go back. You say, you know what? We missed that Wednesday session. We've got to make sure we get that on the schedule so that you don't miss that information. Or so that, right, we still have that check-in we needed to have. You need consistent check-ins and with multiple people, because you might feel really comfortable telling me that, you know what, this isn't really going well, but you might not feel comfortable telling your direct manager, or you might feel more comfortable telling the owner this particular issue, but the office manager something else. So you need consistent check-ins. I know a lot of people do 30, 60, 90, and then they're like, great, we made 90 days, we're home free. Most people are still deciding up to 6 months after they have accepted that offer. They are still deciding whether or not they want to stay. You need to be in front of them consistently through that period. One of the other recommendations for onboarding, everybody thinks we're so weird for suggesting this. Stop starting people for their new job on Mondays, right? There's a reason Mondays are hard. They're chaotic. We're all coming back from the weekend. We also all come dragging and going, it's Monday. Well, that's not the way you want your you just show up to your new hire. Instead, start them on a Tuesday or Wednesday. That gives everybody in the company Monday to figure out what the heck happened, get everything solved, and then on Tuesday, show up excited and ready to welcome them in with open arms. I don't know where we thought Monday needed to be start date, but go with a Tuesday or a Wednesday. Either of them make for a much, much better outcome. And then start your onboarding before day one, not by having them read manuals or things like that, but reaching out, welcoming them on board, walking them through, hey, here's what your first day is going to look like. You want to knock candidates' socks off? Send them a written document beforehand saying, here's our plan for your first 3 weeks. I guarantee most of us, even in our 50s, would be like, that's never happened before, right? Do those kinds of things. Tell them little things like, by the way, here's where you can put your lunch, right? Or have a buddy call, have somebody else on the team call them and welcome them on board and say, look, we're excited to have you. Do you have any day-to-day kind of questions for me that would be helpful to know? Here's the key piece that is, again, that paradigm shift. We have to get away from the old school thinking of, let's see if they stick and then let's invest in them. Because you know what, they might not show up tomorrow anyway. Well, guess what? They're probably not going to if we keep going at it with that approach. Instead, we have to go into this process with this concept that it's our job to earn their trust, right? Because they're not going to follow leaders that they don't trust. So it's our job as leaders to earn their trust and to wow them that we're different and they're here for a very different experience. And when we can do that in the onboarding process, your quality gets better, and your efficiency gets better because you get to do a lot less of this unless you're growing. But even then, this is all more scalable and repeatable. Your goals in onboarding are really important, right? So many times, especially for crew member roles, we think of the goal of onboarding as like, they got to fill out the paperwork and they got to know how to drive the truck and they got to know like how to mow the lawn. Or in nonprofit, right? Like they got to get here and they got to do the job. If you notice the order of these, teach work processes is the very last thing that you need to worry about in onboarding. It is still important, but before you can get somebody really effective at that, you first have to spend time building trust, aligning values and cultures, fostering relationships with peers, right? I have a friend at work is one of the most important survey questions from the Gallup survey, engagement surveys for a reason. And we have to clarify expectations and performance standards. Where do you expect me to be by the 3-month mark, by the 6-month mark, by the 1-year mark, right? So that I've got a reasonable gauge as to what that's going to look like. And as we're doing those 4 things, we are teaching work processes. But so many companies focus onboarding on teach work processes, and they forget that the other pieces are equally, if not more important. So back to our balanced scorecard, right? Stop and think for your organization, how are you doing in these 3 areas? Are you making the right quality hires? What would your metrics look like there? What is the efficiency of your process? How many people are you putting through to find that right person? Efficiency can be too high or too low and be a problem, right? And then most importantly, what is that experience from beginning to end? From job ad to job application, right, to new hire satisfaction at that 6-month mark. The reality is through all of this, what you want to do is build an efficient and effective, predictable and repeatable recruiting process. That's how you take the headaches out of recruiting, because everything else is just extra noise that makes this already really hard task any more difficult. I'm going to stop there. We do have a couple of minutes for questions. If folks want to put questions in the chat, I'll be happy to answer those. But at the same time, I always like to wrap up our webinars to let everybody know we offer for anybody that comes to one of our webinars. One of the things that we love to do is just connect with people. And so we offer a couple of things for free for being here. One, access to our HR playbook. So if you click on this QR code, put in your information. It's going to send you back an email with a really like a nice little short ebook that is a really cool playbook that takes you beyond just the recruiting part, but what are things you can be doing beyond that to be building a great team and creating the culture that you want. We also ask through that you have the opportunity to book a free strategy session with me. So that is a time where we sit down and talk about what is the challenge from an HR perspective, team's perspective, right? Whatever it may be, what's the challenge that you're faced with today? And what are some recommendations that we have to help solve for that, right? Sometimes it's as easy as me sharing information from another webinar that I've done, right? Other times it's really kind of laying out a plan for you of like, here's the 3 or 4 things that would really make a difference for you to help your team move forward. And then if you are not already on our newsletter, that will put you back in our newsletter mailing list to make sure that you're getting all of this good information. We send things out multiple times throughout the week so that you're getting great information on everything from like what you think of as HR every day to leadership development. So Kelly, great question. Do you always add budget for Indeed job ads? If you want candidates, yes. The answer is yes. There's a big difference between like, it's like 3.1 times more likely to get impressions of a job ad if you have put dollars behind it. Now, that being said, Indeed loves to tell you a dollar amount that you should spend to get more candidates. I would not recommend believing that number. Stacy, who is our operations manager, she actually came out of Progressive Insurance. I got fortunate enough to bring on board with my little adventure here the person who ran recruitment marketing for Progressive Insurance. So not a bad spot to be sitting. She will often go in and do research on like how much, when Indeed says spend $50 more to get more candidates, she will look to see like how many more candidates are they talking. And it is not uncommon that they're like, spend $50 more to get 2 more candidates. You're like, that is not worth $50, but you do need some at minimum, the minimum spend behind all of them. There's also some things about Indeed you need to know that are important to make sure that your accounts do not get flagged. You should never post a job that isn't a job you actually intend to hire for. So a lot of times people are like, let's put it out there and see who's available. If Indeed has any reason to think that you don't intend to actually make a hire, they will flag your account and shut it down. So they do not just flag your job posting, they shut down your entire account. There's some other things that Indeed is just, they've really buttoned down on, and verbiage is one of those. But you definitely want to put your sponsorships behind it. It's really the only way that they will, their algorithm is directly pinned to it. Great. All right. I want to take time. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope you found this super helpful. Please don't hesitate. Send me an email afterwards. I'd love to hear like what your biggest takeaway was from today. But I hope everything here was helpful, and I hope everybody has a fantastic Wednesday. Enjoy your week.